many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Financed by art. created money is legendary. Think military-industrial complex, free welfare benefits, bank bailouts, and early access to inflated currency. All these items play its thinking about the false promises of the socialists. This, along with the large number of economic Marxists who have inundated our government-run colleges, presents a problem that feeds into the anger. It doesn't take a lot of searching to witness the anger in action on the campuses, as expressed by both students and faculties. This conflict encourages envy and greed to flourish, and justified with a sense of moral indignation. The greater the chaos, the easier it is for the Marxists to join in the fray and promote hate and destruction of culture and traditional norms. It's essential that the economic distortions that arrive with the QEs as part of Keynesian economic planning will need corrected to restore long-term economic growth. The full cost of decades of deficit spending must be paid for one way or another. The problem of economic ignorance and misplaced good intentions will need to be addressed in order to steer a course that rejects the notion that unlimited government spending can be financed by the dangerous QE type of monetary inflation. This, sadly, will not be considered until the super bubble bursts and it becomes evident that the correction that has been avoided so far has become a necessity. It is my opinion that the QE bubble is bigger than the housing bubble and the dot-com bubble combined. It is no easy task to correct for all the malinvestments and excesses debt and provide for all the unfunded liabilities. In the process of paying the piper, the country is destined to become much poorer, especially since a miraculous increase in productivity is unlikely in spite of the hoped-for benefits from the recently passed tax law. Economic, psychological, and political pressure will prevent the changes in policy needed to deal with the huge, complicated mess that QEs have generated. What we are experiencing is the climactic end of a gigantic experiment with a fiat currency inflation, the size of which was never tried before. The Fed has followed a deliberate policy of monetary debasement from the time it was sanctioned in 1913. Though there was a steady erosion of the dollar's value throughout the 20th century, a link to gold was maintained until the closing of the gold window by Nixon in 1971. A total fiat currency, the dollar, was unleashed on the world with this event, and the U.S. became the biggest beneficiary of assuming the role of managing the world reserve currency. For decades, this well served America's interests since it was equivalent to the world permitting us to create as much gold as we wanted. The system was totally fraudulent since it was imaginary money and we owned the printing press. Why should anyone be surprised at the results of what excessive money creation has caused? Printing fiat currency and expanding the money supply has nothing to do with creating wealth. The process is more likely to destroy wealth than create it. The QE programs have undermined sound economic policy and will continue to do so as the consequences of the massive monetary expansion becomes more evident with the bursting of the bubble economy. Instead of allowing the correction to run its course, the economic planners continue to pursue the goal of invigorating a failed experiment. Keynesianism created the monster crisis that we're facing, and yet the platitudes pushed by both political parties fail to address the subject of huge deficits and massive spending. This process can't be stopped as long as the politicians and the special interests persistently and strongly oppose restricting the current role of our government. A compliant citizenry that fails to grasp the importance of liberty and instead accepts dependency on government as a substitute for self-reliance guarantees that the bursting of the QE bubble will generate a much more serious crisis than it need be. What's involved in the bubble? Well, plenty. Almost everything to some degree. It's difficult for an economy to operate smoothly without a sound currency to measure value when goods and services are transferred from one entity to another. A definable medium of exchange is crucial to facilitate the market. Ever since direct bartering was phased out more than 3,000 years ago, the choice of the marketplace for money has been something tangible. As the understanding of the nature of money developed, the items used for money were easily recognizable, divisible, long-lasting, and definable. Early on, governments challenged the market choices, especially when gold and silver were chosen, and replaced them with a government monopoly control over the currency. The contest between the market's desire for honest money and the government's desire to solidify power by usurping the authority to debase the currency started early on and continues to this day. Government's monopoly over the creation of money is equivalent to counterfeiting and resulted from the fact that the people never liked to pay taxes for unnecessary wars and to provide benefit to the politicians and their friends. Though beneficial to the powerful few, the abuse and the inequitable distribution of wealth that resulted would inexorably stir anger and rebellion within the people who demanded changes to the system. It's true that nothing ever changes under the sun or with human nature. We today are approaching a political and economic crisis of enormous proportion as a consequence of the age-old phenomenon of abuse from a government financed by a modern-day monetary destruction of the economy with the QE's dangerous experiment. It is more than a minor correction that is needed to deal with the huge excesses that today exist worldwide. Many of the central planners in charge reassure us that the concern for a dangerous bubble existing is completely unfounded, since the CPI is barely rising. 2 points. The CPI is rising faster than they will admit. And number two, the CPI is not the telltale sign of a serious bubble forming. Many other bubbles and dislocations can exist as a consequence of creating trillions of dollars out of thin air. And there are quite a few. The housing bubble is back, along with subprime loans. There's an auto financing bubble encouraged by subprime loans for many customers. The stock market is in a bubble waiting to be pricked. The bond market is in a huge bubble as a result of low or negative interest rates. Wall Street has inflated expectations that America is quickly being made great again. Exaggerated trust exists in the dollar, maintaining its reserve status for the foreseeable future. The unwinding of the Fed's balance sheet and a move toward the market rates of interest is a long way off. Deficit financing for the military-industrial complex will not be challenged before the QE bubble bursts. Saving for a rainy day or to make a future purchase is not considered sound policy. Unlimited borrowing is. Credit card debt is in a bubble. Student debt is in a bubble. Transfer payments to the dependent poor will never be cut. Instead, when the big bubble bursts, these payments will skyrocket since the process will generate more poor. The medical care spending bubble has created a huge mess with misallocation of resources, runaway costs, and poor care. Corporate medicine must end and be replaced by a free market. Cultural Marxism's influence on American college campuses is a dangerous bubble. The dollar is in a bubble. The unpayable pension system, federal, state, county, city, involves trillions of dollars. The unpayable debt bubble can only be held together by accelerating inflation and the liquidation of debt by currency debasement. This is a very dangerous economic and political solution that seems inevitable. The problem describes what happens to a bankrupt country refusing to live within its means instead of being reassured that things are going well because Wall Street is booming. It should be a warning sign that danger lies ahead and reveals the growing imbalance between rich and poor. The bubble mentality of neocon warmongering needs to end. The sooner the better. Sadly, it will only end after the dollar-driven bubble economy collapses. The foreign policy of militant interventionism needs to be extinguished. It's a major source of debt and lost credibility for us, both of which undermines dollar hegemony. The bursting of the dollar bubble will not be a minor event. The adjustments required to restore economic prosperity and preserve liberty will be a major challenge to all freedom-loving Americans. The excesses of an economy based on debt, inflation, central planning, constant war, the military-industrial complex, and crony capitalism all contribute to a growing disparity of wealth between rich and poor. This type of command system is self-limited, but eventually always fails. Though it takes a lot to kill a once robust economy, our political leaders have managed to set the stage for a major crisis brought on by QE's attempt to rescue it from the coming bankruptcy. The problems we face today did not appear overnight. It took many decades to create the conditions of bankruptcy and the beginning of the end for the dollar as the world's reserve currency. There have been many warning signs dating all the way back to the origination of the Federal Reserve in 1913 and with the subsequent growth of central banking worldwide. The Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944 established the dollar as the reserve currency of the world with a watered-down version of the gold standard and was destined to fail as it did in 1971. Noted free market economist Henry Hazlitt, at that time of its inception, predicted that it would fail due to inflationary policies that the Fed would not be able to resist. Throughout the 20th century, the Fed created many recessions and depressions that were papered over with accelerating inflation and government deficit spending. It worked to some degree on the short run, but postponed the required payment for another day. Unfortunately, that day has arrived, and the flawed policy of delaying the payment needed to keep the economy churning is no longer working. The replacement of the Bretton Woods arrangement with the fiat dollar standard in 1971 continued to benefit the U.S. by it maintaining control over the world reserve currency. This arrangement permitted us to export our inflated dollars and buy cheap imported goods from overseas. This led to a structural imbalance in foreign trade with a hefty short-term benefit to us at the expense of a huge foreign debt. When the magnitude of this problem hit in 2007, the QE program of massive credit creation was initiated, which only compounded the problems already generated by zero and negative interest rates, along with astronomical budgetary deficits. More drugs for the addicted never solves their problem. The search is now on for a solution to our financial time bomb. A foreign policy presenting great danger to the world, and the systematic attack on our liberties here at home. We're beyond the point where more lies and deception will calm the anger. The wealth available for bribing the masses is quickly dwindling as the demands and expectations grow. The dollar is destined to go down in value, as it has been doing since 1971. We are getting weaker and poorer, and other world governments are getting stronger and richer. The dollar this past year lost more than 10%. There's a lot of built-up resentment toward America for the privileged financial position that it has enjoyed for decades, while it flaunted its exceptionalism backed by a militant foreign policy. This arrangement is ending, and the process will not go smoothly. Though the consequences of QE are all around us, there's little else that planners will consider. A repeat of this failed effort will be tried again with worse results. Cutting spending, reining in the Fed, and strictly limiting the role of government can only be achieved in the distant future after the current crony capitalism and welfare state self-destructs. Preparing for that day is a job for all who desire to live in a free society. If current authoritarian policies are left unchecked, our economic conditions will deteriorate and true freedom will only be a memory. There's a growing number of people becoming aware of the significance of the Fed's disastrous monetary policy and the utter silliness of QE. Since few people expect the privileged class to promote sound money, many outside of government are seeking a system of money that protects wealth rather than destroys it. Historically, money originated in the marketplace as a tangible asset. The choice for thousands of years has been the precious metals, especially gold. Governments notoriously have taken over monopoly control of the monetary systems and used them to benefit the government over the people. Because of the abuse of the currency over the centuries, a return to gold was frequently needed to restore order and confidence in the money. For this reason, I have been a champion of competing currencies to allow the people to make the choice about the monetary unit, as long as no fraud is involved. A government-designed currency should also be free of fraud. This means no fiat currency and no legal tender laws. A tangible currency developed in the market, such as gold or silver, should not be subject to sales or capital gains taxes. The race is now on to find an alternative to our current dollar system in order to escape from the Federal Reserve-run banking system. Cryptocurrencies have been offered as an alternative with much vigor. By January 3rd, 2008, their total capitalization was more than $700 billion, with 97% of that achieved in less than a year. It has been declared a mania by many. This type of price appreciation would not have occurred without the funds, the QEs, generated by the Federal Reserve. The money managers have been in a quandary for the past 10 years because inflated money supply and the very low interest rates did not generate the economic growth they wished for. Now it's going into numerous bubbles like stocks, bonds, housing, student debt, and cryptocurrencies. My view is that the entire economy is a huge bubble, with sovereign debt being the most dangerous. Though currently there is a lackadaisical interest in gold compared to cryptocurrencies, I believe gold is in the early stage of a third major bull market since 1971, which started 2 years ago when gold was $1,050 an ounce. If history is of any benefit, gold will be used in the coming monetary reform, whether it's accomplished by the government or the market. But if the choice of a monetary unit turns out not related to something tangible, it will prove to be a first in history. Just because our current money is now a total fiat dollar, it can't be used to justify a market-developed fiat currency. We must remember that the dollar was originally defined as a weight of gold or silver. The destructive nature of the monetary event of August 15, 1971, was a consequence of a government refusing to maintain the dollar's relationship to something tangible, thus making it a fiat currency. This explains why we're in such a mess. A fiat currency developed in the market won't solve the current financial crisis the world faces. A sound currency must have a fixed definition of a tangible item. Its value must be determined by free market pricing in exchange for goods and services. Bimetallism, by fixing an ounce of gold to a certain number of ounces of silver, was unworkable. Fixing the definition of the monetary unit is similar to fixing the exact length of a yard or a meter. The yard can be used to measure any item you want, and it's crucial to all construction. Likewise, a currency with a fixed definition of a tangible item will facilitate all market transactions. A fiat currency without a precise definition, by its very nature, will fluctuate wildly and interfere with all economic calculations. This is why all fiat currencies are destructive and end badly. The dollar since 1971 has been a fiat currency, and the mischief it has caused has been especially harmful and broad since it has served as the world reserve currency. The importance of this is evident when the U.S. government is willing to exert military force against those who threaten to abandon the dollar in world trade. All paper or fiat money self-destructs and has limited lifespans. Gold currencies last until governments debase them into a fiat currency. The fiat dollar today, for many nefarious reasons, is constantly being destroyed by counterfeiting, posing as politicians and central bankers. The day is fast approaching when the fiat dollar standard will need a major overhaul. The age of quantitative easing is ending. In summation, the trillions of dollars created by the QE program have not restored soundness to the economy. QE did not address the problems caused by a central bank manipulating interest rates, determining the money supply, continuing to monetize government debt, pursuing central planning, and depending on a very unstable fiat currency. Only true monetary reform can address these problems. The economic and political clout that a central bank has in managing a fiat currency system is enormous. Without the government's ability to create money out of thin air, the cost of financing needless wars and the welfare state would be prohibitive. This arrangement guarantees excessive government and a systematic abuse of liberty. The people lose, the special interests always win. We're at the point where another QE inflationary binge will not tide us over in the next economic downturn. We're fast approaching the time when true monetary reform will be required to deal with the sin of living beyond our means. If that is not done, expect a long period of economic chaos, inner-city violence, and political warfare. Sometimes I'm asked, why do I have to be so pessimistic? Actually, many more see me as being optimistic. Optimism comes with a willingness to acknowledge the truth and deal with it in a positive manner, with policies that make sense. Accepting bad ideas that purport to provide unlimited free benefits to everyone is a deception that ends in disappointment. Instead of helping the poor, welfare serves the interests of the wealthy and the bureaucrats. Refusing to change policy will only extend the bad consequences that come from the Federal Reserve's atrocious management of monetary policy. In medicine, a correct diagnosis of a serious illness can be very depressing. But knowing that treatment is available is uplifting. Remaining in denial of a problem's severity is a dangerous option. Knowledge and truth lead to optimism. In politics and economics, the only decision to be made is to decide whether or not the goal of peace and prosperity can be best achieved by more intrusive government or by promoting personal liberty. If peace and prosperity are the goal, and flawed policies are identified, an understanding of what needs to be done should be greeted with applause. Fortunately, the answers are not complex, and when discovered, most agree that they are based on common sense. The philosophy of liberty is based on the moral principle of non-aggression being applied to all individuals and governments. If individuals can't steal or cheat, neither should the government. If individuals can't harm or kill, neither should the government. Unfortunately, throughout history, it's been government that has committed the greatest crimes of aggression against humanity. A modest beginning for us would be to rein in government-initiated violence by rejecting the Federal Reserve's authority to finance wars of aggression overseas and the welfare state at home. The political chaos, as reflected by the mess in Washington, is an expected consequence of the last 100 years of our drift away from a limited government philosophy. There is now a growing interest in the cause of liberty as it becomes evident that the current system is financially and morally bankrupt. The intellectual groundwork has been laid for a free society, and with the disintegration of the current system, there is room for hope that truth will out and a better world for peace and prosperity will be available to us. Thanks for joining me in this special report.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out, subscribe. Great reports put out daily, so check them out. Now with this bubble, it's good to see the economy doing better. But what I worry about, yes, job numbers are a little bit better. You know, again, the things that we brought up when Obama was in office, you know, unemployment rates, that just means more people aren't jumping on unemployment, which is good, but they were starting to fall off under Obama. But that doesn't mean those people all found jobs. So we really have to look at, you know, new hires. Of course, a lot of people are still not where they were, you know, 10 years ago when all of this happened. So you got a lot of people that are still working their way up. So it's good to see the economy doing great. But when you also look at what the stock market's doing, it's saying everything is great. It's just perfect when it's not. You know it's not. Yeah, it's better, but it's not, you know, that great. We hope to see it get that great, but it's not that great. Which lets you know there's a bubble. Now, how good the economy does dictates how long they can grow that bubble. It's only until the economy stalls or starts doing worse that bubble will pop. But when it pops, I think what we've seen 10 years ago would be little in comparison. So we can't get over optimistic about, oh, stock market's doing great. There was an article out of the economiccollapseblog.com back in December. 41 million Americans are living in poverty this Christmas. So things aren't great. So we have a artificially inflated system going on here. The bubble is being created now. And Ron Paul talked about a few of the things that contribute to that. You know, the whole thing 10 years ago, and the Fed. We still need to be chanting that. the manipulation of the market, despite what all these economists tell you that have been wrong, that were wrong about the collapse until it was already in progress. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's too late to sound the alarm. Ron Paul, on the other hand, was already sounding the alarm. But you get the Trump supporters that just, they want everything to look great because they love Trump so much. Well, jump on whatever bandwagon you want. I want to look at facts and truth. So we have to see that it's inflated. Kind of like Bitcoin was a little overinflated. Give me a second here. I'll tell you what Bitcoin's sitting around. Coinbase, it's at 10,812. So it's doing about what I figured it would do. It's going to probably level off right about around here. It might drop a little lower, but not much. I think it's going to level off around here. But what did I tell you would make it drop? Companies jumping off the bandwagon. Microsoft has jumped off the bandwagon. Now, if we see more companies follow suit, that's when you're going to have a problem with Bitcoin. But that's to be seen. The thing about the cryptocurrency, it's not just being used by big companies right now. A lot of people still are interchanging it among each other. They'll donate it to people or buy things off people, and those people will go cash it out. And then someone else buys it, and then they buy things with it. It's still being used as a way to transfer currency. You could almost look at it as a transfer service. But when you do that, you start equating it to the dollar, which it's not. And you can see that in how it's been acting. But I really do think that we're going to see it level off. I think that Microsoft announcement is what did cause it to drop. I want to, it was down around 9,000. Just today, 9,200. Give me a second here as it updates. Trying to get it weekly. Yeah, that's been in the past week, 9,200 according to CoinDesk, and 14,942 at the high. Coinbase, give me a second here. I'm trying not to burn up internet power, so I'm using mobile for that. Coinbase, 8,950 with the high of 15,120. So, and it's back on the uptick. It's already been back on the uptick for probably, not sure here. But anyways, in a day here, probably in the past hour or so, it's been going up pretty good. So I think it's back on the rise, and I don't think it's going to fall unless we hear more bad news. So we will see where that goes. But just beware of bubbles. You know them when you see them. You should feel it in your gut. Okay, the economy's doing a little bit better, and that's a good thing. But it's only been a year that it's really started to take off. We have 3 more years with Trump. We don't know where that's going. So we still have to be careful. I'm going to move on to this other clip here, and another subject. And this has to deal with the physical and the mental test that Trump has undergone. And I believe he asked for it because so many people are running around saying he has a mental disorder. So
it's a very interesting question.
We'll get into this. Here we go. Stefan Molyneux.
That bears a lot of deep and important thought. The question of what does it mean to be sane? What does it mean to be crazy? It is no mark of mental health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick system. If you are not well adjusted to a sick and evil system, then you may be crazy, like you may want some new or different sick or evil system. Like you might be like the new mafia gang that wants to kick out the old mafia gang. It's not the same as virtue. But you may be sane if you're not well adjusted to a profoundly sick system. Now, whatever lives long enough, as Nietzsche says, whatever lives long enough becomes so saturated in rationality, pseudo-rationality, that its improbable origins become hard to conceive of. I'm paraphrasing. And when a system has lasted a generation or two, and certainly longer than that, then it becomes the norm, and thinking outside the paradigms of that system become crazy. So when slavery, which has existed for tens of thousands of years in all corners and aspects of human society, including the indigenous people in America, when people said, I don't think slavery is moral, I don't think slavery is good, they were considered insane. Not like, oh, that's crazy, like you're genuinely insane, morally insane. And when people say, I don't think the welfare state is moral, it's like, well, you're crazy. There's no other conceivable way to help the poor. You want them to die in the streets and so on. And, of course, the opposite is true. Under the welfare state, the poor are going to do absolutely wretchedly when the government runs out of money and trying to find a viable alternative before. It's crazy to jump out of a plane unless you have a parachute and the plane is heading into a mountain. You understand, right? Now, the arbiters of what is sane have been a wide variety of groups throughout human history. They've been politicians. They have been priests. They have been artists a lot of times as well. And in the modern world, they tend to be sort of mental health professionals, so psychiatrists, social workers, psychologists, and so on. Now, I'm no professional. These are just my thoughts on the matter, but I certainly have considered it. For a long time, mental health issues are rampant in my family of origin, and so if your family's prone to heart disease, you better exercise and eat well and learn what is healthy pretty damn quickly, or you won't do very well in the long run. And in the past, of course, if you were profoundly maladjusted, you were demonically possessed, you were like evil had taken over your system, because the system in the world is very hard to reform. Is very hard to reform. And if you can label people as crazy, then they can be excluded from social discourse. You can brush aside their arguments. It's a fundamental ad hominem. And you see this, of course, all over the place in the West at the moment. It comes from the left and the right. So for the left, anyone to the right of Mao Zedong is like a Nazi, is an alt-right, is, a supremacist, a white nationalist, whatever it is, right? And that's just a way of saying, well, they're crazy / evil, and therefore don't listen to their arguments, don't waste your time. It's a way of creating a big, fiery, alligator-filled moat. Actually, that wouldn't really work because the alligators would be on fire, but you get the point. It creates a big, fiery moat around a particular school of thought so that it can no longer ever be examined with any curiosity. It can only be condemned from a distance. And so if you can create an accumulation of insanity or evil and wrap it around a particular belief system, or a particular argument, particular ideology, then people will no longer examine that ideology because, any more than, you sort of go follow the crazy guy ranting on the street corner, write down what he says in case there are pearls of wisdom. I mean, there may be, but it'll be pretty accidental, to say the least. So when you have a system, all systems outside of like a purely free society, which I've talked about before, but all systems become progressively crazier over time. Statist systems become, like government, coercive systems, monopoly on violence systems become progressively crazier over time. I mean, look at the early Roman Empire versus the late Roman Empire, and you can check out my Truth About the History of the Roman Empire on this very channel. It's a great presentation. And it's an axiom that all organizations not specifically devoted to the right will inexorably become more and more leftist. Like the Democrat Party of 2018 is a long, long way from the Democrat Party of JFK in the early 1960s. It has been progressively taken over by, leftists, if not outright communists in some contexts. And there are some arguments about that with regards to libertarianism and just other groups. They just get progressively more and more leftist, especially if they gain any kind of power. So the arbiters of a system and its relationship to sanity versus insanity are very often gatekeepers to protect that existing system. So I'll give you an example. So under the Soviet Union, under Lenin, under Stalin, in the Soviet Union, well, by definition, communism was perfect. The Soviet Union was perfect. And therefore, of course, anyone who failed to be happy, who failed to be well-adjusted, who failed to be content, who failed to be productive, because the system was perfect, anybody who failed to flourish within that system must be crazy, must be mentally ill. And this was, of course, where they put people who were dissidents. Sometimes they would go to gulags, of course, if they were evil, according to the regime, but if they were just maladjusted but not traitors or couldn't be branded as counter-revolutionaries or something, then they went to mental institutions where they would be tranquilized with enough narcotics to put down half a horde of horses. And this, you are not adjusted, therefore you must be crazy. It's one of the great scenes in Western literature in 1984 when O'Brien says to Winston Smith, basically, the system, like, you have to let go of any kind of rationality to fit into this system. If the party requires that you say 2 and 2 make 5, then you must not only say, but genuinely believe that 2 and 2 make 5, which is a confession of a crazy system, and postmodernism is that way as well. You must both simultaneously, under postmodernism, very, very toxic, very leftist, under totalitarian style postmodernism, you must simultaneously believe that there is no such thing as truth and no such thing as good and evil. And at the same time, those who oppose you are absolutely wrong and absolutely evil. Right? You have to hold, it's a sanity test, a fundamental sanity test that goes on the left, which is like, it's like being a determinist. Like if you're a determinist and you believe that no one is responsible, no one has a choice. Everybody's just like rocks bouncing down a mountainside. Nobody has any choice. Nobody has any free will. Nobody's moral responsibility. You must simultaneously believe that nobody has any moral responsibility and then go around calling someone a racist and that it's bad and wrong for them to hold those views. Like you have to simultaneously hold these two completely contradictory positions. And this system that we kind of have going on in the world, you must, like, look at the millionaires, like the rich people who say, tax me more, I want to pay more taxes. Well, that's an insane thing because no one's stopping you. Obviously, if you want to pay more taxes, write a check to the government. They'll cash it. Might even write you a thank you note. But so this idea that you have to force someone to do something which they voluntarily really want to do. It's like, I don't know. I mean, Freddie Mercury gets resurrected from the dead and does a one-time concert, and it's like, well, government, you really got to force me to go because I'm totally desperate to go. Well, it's like, I want to make love with you, therefore you should rape me. Like it's a completely, if you want to do it, you don't need the government to do it. So this insane system, and like once you reason from first principles, this is the challenge that philosophy brings to these systems. It's all mental. Right? The government is how we do good in society. The government is a monopoly on violence. Violence is the only way. A monopoly on violence is the only way we can do good in society. The majority of people choose to help the poor through the welfare state, but without the welfare state, no one will help the poor. The majority of people really care about the sick, But if the government doesn't force them to care about the sick and to pay for sick people will never be, like, I could go on all day, and I have for many, many years, but it's all crazy stuff. And when you start to reason from first principles, it becomes very difficult to look at the system and not just see crazy stuff spilling out all over the place. It's that, unplug the matrix, or from the matrix kind of issue. And psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health professionals in general, and lots of good exceptions, I've had a lot of them on the show, but my particular perception is there's a very challenging profession for many people to be in, because who benefits the most from objective, rational, healthy mental health services? Well, it's children. It's children. But children don't pay the bills. Who pays the bills? Governments, schools, parents, and so on, right? So if a family is crazy, if a school system is crazy, if a society is crazy in its relationship to children, well, what are mental health professionals supposed to do? If they take the side of the children, then they are seriously criticizing the adults and the system. But it's the adults and the system that pays them. So it's a big problem. If you are a psychiatrist that's involved with some school system in the West, some government school system, well, if a child is not doing well in that school system, well, the school system is perfect, right? Because the school system is basically communist. It's why everything drifts leftwards, because the educational system is fundamentally communist, right? From each according to their ability, to each according to their needs, a foundational aspect of Marxist thinking, from the taxpayers to the children. And so if you are a mental health professional in the school system and some kid is not doing well in the school system, do you take on the entire system and attempt to change it so that it gives, say, boys are doing terribly under the revamped school system that was massively changed to address an imaginary problem of female underperformance? It was all anecdotal and false when the data was drilled down, but it doesn't matter because it's gynocracy, female privilege. So do you say to the kid, oh yeah, the system is crazy, you're sane, you're being bullied, you're being pressured, you're being understimulated, you're being asked to learn in some girly manner if you're some sort of hyper-creative boy or whatever, and so let's take on and fix the system? Do you sit down with the teacher and say, he's restless because you're boring? He's not interested because your curriculum is not interesting. He's a hands-on learner. He needs this. Do you sit down and sort of change the whole? Well, what can you do? I mean, there are a few people, who will take that on, but not many. Not many. Most people respond directly to these kinds of incentives. Or do you say to the kid, well, take these pills and everything will be fine? The system is great. If you're not working within the system, if you're not flourishing within the system, like communism, if you're not, it's not like communism, it kind of is communism. If you're not flourishing within the system, then you are the problem and you need to be fixed. And the reason why pills, of course, are so seductive is that if you start to drill in and you find out that the kid is really ambitious, is really creative, reads books on the side and programs computers and, fixes cars and so on, is motivated, does care, sits in a library. Well, what happens is then the kid is fine, which means the system is crazy and you can't really fix the system. And it's the same thing I think that happens with parents sometimes, with social workers and so on, right? They have, the parents are paying the bills, say, or the parents are responsible for the bills being paid if it's being paid through the government. And if the family is crazy, you can say to the parents, well, your kid's fine, you're nuts. Or, however diplomatically that happens, I don't know. Well, then the parents are going to be mad at you, and can the parents make your life more difficult compared to the kid? Well, sure. They can quit, they can complain, whatever, right? So this aspect is really a great and huge challenge. Nobody really knows how to solve it as yet. I think the identification of it is really, really important. So the key to understand is that whoever pays the piper calls the tune. Whoever pays the bills for mental health professionals is in general the system that is considered the sane, the healthy, the good system. And anybody who fails to conform to that system, in a sense, you're being paid to excuse the system. right? You are being paid to demonize the nonconformists with labels, and you are being paid to excuse the system, to say basically, implicitly or explicitly, nothing wrong with the school system, nothing wrong with communism. It is you who need to be fixed. And now, of course, it generally is biochemically, which is, well, a challenge to put it mildly. So the other thing, too, is that a lot of people who go through arts degrees, who go through these kind of mental health professional degrees, kind of end up on the left. So because they end up on the left, they have a very tough time looking at the mainstream media and saying, whoa, hang on a sec. You are fomenting and whipping into a rabid hysteria, a significant mental health crisis in America. And don't underestimate this. It's a huge issue in America. The Trump derangement syndrome, as it's been called, as a huge and real issue. People are going nuts. People are, like, marriages are breaking up. People are unable to sleep. People are just having a hell of a time because the media is constantly whipping up this frenzy of this crazy, lunatic, illegitimate, Russia colluding, bomb pushing, North Korea taunting madman. To the point where when Donald Trump tweets out, he says something along the lines of, well, I've been very lucky over the course of my life to have a great deal of mental stability. I'm really, really smart. I'm a genius, and I'm a stable genius at that, too. And why? I'm big in TV and build houses and businesses all over the world, tens of thousands, 10,000 plus employees. And first time I tried to become president against 17 very talented contenders for the nomination, I became president. So I'm a genius, but I'm a stable genius, right? Now, this drives some people nuts. I don't know why. I mean, it seems true, right? I don't know if it's Dunning-Kruger. You can't recognize competence in other people unless you're competent in something yourself. I don't know. But it's a true statement. They're saying he's crazy. Psychiatrists are out there saying he's crazy. And he's saying, no, he's very stable. And all of the evidence is that, of course, he is stable and functioning at a very, very super high level. And he is a genius. Like, it just is. It just is a fact. I mean, you can look at his SAT scores, you can extrapolate his IQ, and it's staggeringly high. And his practical experience in the application of that genius over many decades has left him almost without peer, I think, in terms of pragmatic action in the world, certainly in the West. And so the people who are saying Donald Trump is crazy, well, they are facing a lot of upset from their patients. And people have talked about this, mental health professionals have talked about this, and they've said, my patients, they can't sleep, they're anxious, they're worried all the time, they're freaking out, and so on. Well, I mean, that's mostly the mainstream media, I think. There is a sort of elemental, if you're dependent on the state, anybody who threatens the existing system or the existing structure is dangerous to you at a kind of existential. But freedom can be ferocious to people dependent on the fruits of coercion, right? So if you are dependent on the power of the state, economic liberty, lower taxes, more economic freedom, and so on, they, creak past like a tiger on an old boat. They just like crawling around while you're sitting down. Yeah, it's scary. It's terrifying. Liberty is a predator to those dependent on state power. And they're kind of freaking out. And you add to that natural anxiety, which could be calmed by the media as a whole, could be calmed. But the media is basically Iago these days. Like it's whispering massively inflammatory falsehoods into the minds of unstable people. And of course, with the goal, I think, unconsciously or consciously, is with the goal of escalating violence within society. You continue to broadcast these crazy escalations, and sooner or later, I mean, someone's going to, they already have, someone's going to try and act on it. So the mental health professionals are facing, I think, in their patients, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of that has to do with Trump, right? Trump, it's an old thing Socrates said many, many years ago. He said, the problem with democracy, you got one guy who says, here are your vegetables and here's your Bowflex. You got to work out, you got to eat right. Well, most people don't really want to do that. You got another guy who says, hey, I got a great Barca Lounger and here's your bowl of bonbons. Donuts, right? So who are people going to vote for? you know what life is? You pay me now, you pay me later, right? I mean, you can defer gratification and end up with a more stable and prosperous life down the road, or you can eat all your goodies and forget about that winter is coming. Winter is, I just started watching. Anyway, man, that's gory. But so a lot of mental health professionals facing a lot of craziness coming out of their patients. It's being whipped up into a frenzy by the mainstream media, who are, you know, preying on mentally fragile people in order to oppose the presidency. It's cowardly, and I think it's horrible and incredibly exploitative. Again, these are leftists, very, very sensitive about the vulnerable being exploited, but you'll stoke the fears of very frightened people in order to pursue your political agenda. It's to me absolutely beneath contempt. There are rational things to be concerned about in the world, but Donald Trump's sanity is not one of them. So in this kind of environment, because the psychiatrists who are involved in this kind of stuff, I don't think probably can't even see how much hysteria is being whipped up by the mainstream media, and people are watching CNN all day. It's like, oh my God, what's coming to an end? And so they see all of this instability. They can't identify the cause, which is the media, I think. And so, wow, Trump's got to be crazy. He's got to be crazy. And when you are paid by a system, a lot of health professionals are, when you're paid by a system, you will that system. Right? I mean, if there's a king who pays you and a usurper who doesn't, who are you going to defend? Well, most times it's going to be the king who pays you, pays the piper calls it in. So a lot of mental health professionals, again, there are noble exceptions, and I want to acknowledge that, but in general, human beings respond to incentives and direct financial incentives. So there is a system that pays mental health professionals, and that system is generally the state. And Donald Trump is static in the state. He's a disrupting influence. He is a break in the continuum. When the continuum was heading down to disaster, so it's an updraft. It won't keep us aloft forever, but it should keep us aloft, hopefully, to stabilize things a lot. And so he is disrupting a system which people who are paid by that system really, really want to defend. Now, nobody wants to look in the mirror and say, I'm paid by bad people sometimes to do bad things. It's natural, right? And again, there are exceptions, but if Donald Trump is not crazy, then the existing system is crazy because they're in opposition. And it's not like so if the existing system is crazy, then people have to look at that which is funding their six-figure plus lifestyles and say, ooh, if Donald Trump is saying then the system is crazy, then I'm being paid to defend a system that's crazy, which means I have to punish the sane and reward the crazy. And I'm not being objective. I'm bought and paid for in my definitions. And that's a very, very difficult thing for people to do, very difficult thing for people to do. So if the existing system, which has lasted, there's the prior Trump and then post-Trump, and I generally put the left and the right, the Republicans and the Democrats, in a big bucket of nastiness and corruption and betrayal, with inside the Republicans being worse than the Democrats, because the Republicans would promise what they did not deliver. They would hold up this sort of small government free kit stuff, and then, well, social spending of the government in general went up under Republican administrations because the Republicans weren't in opposition and the Democrats hit the gas and the Republicans hit the gas. And they're immense, with some exceptions. Rand Paul, Ron Paul have come to mind, and some others. But prior to Trump, it was a swamp on both sides. You got your blue swamp, you got your red swamp, but the dividing line is as thin as a hair, as thin as my mohawk. And after Trump, because Trump has, he's significantly shrunk regulations. There's a lot of optimism. Apple is talking about, bringing $200 billion back in reparations. 40, 50 companies have now given their employees very significant bonuses, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, as a result of the corporate tax cuts, which, again, I entirely predicted, as did anyone who knows anything about the free market. And things are going pretty well. DACA may be an entirely other story that makes it. Like, if you don't have a, see, here's the thing. If the economy gets better and you don't have a wall, you have more gold on the front yard with no fence around it. You're just attracting more criminals and pilferers and parasites. Having a good economy without a wall is an invitation to disaster, like running through the worst neighborhood with $100 bills taped to your naked body. And you're Kim Kardashian, I don't know whoever is considered hot these days for the young. And so as Trump improves things, the craziness of the prior system becomes more and more evident, and then it begins to dawn. I think this is an unconscious process, but I think it begins to dawn on people that they may not have been serving a rational system, that they may not have been paid by and supporting and defending a rational system. They may have been paid for, defended, and supported a crazy system. That is very tough, especially, of course, if you're a mental health professional. So the idea, and it's sort of the next stage, it's the next thing, right? If the Russia collusion begins to collapse as his text between Strzok and his lover emerge, and there'll be many, many more to come, and as the Department of Justice begins to open up back up investigations, or opens up investigations into the Clinton Foundation and into the emails. So the emails, it's a deal because they say, oh, well, other people use private emails. Yes, but not their own private email servers, right? So if you used AOL or Yahoo or whatever, at least it was archived there. But if you have your own server and you wipe it, it's really hard to reconstruct, to recreate. So as this begins to move forward, and as the Russian narrative, as it has been for a while, collapses further, well, they need something else. I mean, they're not going to give up. You're not going to give up. If the wolves are chasing you and you're running through the woods and wolves can't climb trees, you gotta grab a tree and pull yourself up. But if the first tree branch breaks, you go to the next tree branch, and if that breaks and you can't reach the third, you go to another tree. Like, you don't stop. There's opposition to Trump because this is an existential threat, psychologically, and the perception being physically, to tens of millions of people, dependent on the state. I can't live without it. I can't. The wolves they're not going to stop. You understand? They don't stop. They don't say, oh, well, it turns out the Russia thing was a nothing burger. So we better reevaluate all of this. Maybe we've been a bit hasty, or maybe we should at some point accept the results of the election. Hey, why bother? They haven't in Brexit, haven't even implemented most of it. So they'll just keep going. And Trump's goal of, like, people just got paid a couple of $1,000 to have lower taxes, like, immediately. And they're going to receive lower taxes going forward. So you can't argue, I mean, even Bernie Sanders said that was a good thing. You can't argue against that and say, no, you shouldn't have this money. No, it's bad for you to have this money. Oh, and the corporations are all evil. That corporations are all evil has taken a big blow. A big blow, because they get their taxes cut, corporate taxes get cut, and they're handing out money. It's like Scrooge at the end of the movie, right? I mean, or the end of the book. I mean, as you compare up in Canada here, I mean, the minimum wage just got jacked up, and Tim Hortons, I mean, has to cancel some benefits, has to cancel some paid breaks. I mean, you get two sides. There's one coercive measure and one a reduction of coercive measures, and so people are getting schooled empirically in their bank account, in their wallets, on the values of lower taxation and more liberty. Now, all of this is going to need spending, and spending has been cut. It needs to go a long way further. You don't want to pull a Reagan, right, where you cut taxes but double the federal spending by 2/3, because that creates a huge mess. So, but it's a lot easier to cut government spending when more people are working and fewer people are taking benefits. So people are getting really schooled. And both the Republicans and the Democrats are not looking good, like the rhinos and the historic. So it's a big problem for propagandists. It's one thing for communism and socialism to repeatedly fail. There was an old saying, I think it was Milton Friedman, who said, if you put the federal government in charge of the Sahara, within 5 years, you'd have no sand left. They'd be out of sand. Well, Venezuela's got the world's largest oil reserves. They're out of gasoline. No gasoline. So socialism not working, you can suppress that. it's been so long since there's been a genuine reduction in the size and power of the state over the economy that right now we've got socialism not working and at the same time the free market working. And that's, working in a very tangible way. And like, let's say you cut a bunch of regulations and jobs get created. Those people don't know directly that those jobs have been created because of the cuts and regulations. I mean, it's the seen versus the unseen all the way back to Bastiat. And so we've got this double whammy, this 1-2, right? Which is socialism is failing around the world. And here we have an example of the free market actually working. It's actually being allowed to work a little bit, not much, it's a little bit of air pocket in the bottom of the Titanic. And maybe that's enough to get you back to the surface, get you back to shore. So it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing. If Donald Trump is sane, the system is crazy. And those who represent the system, those who profit from the system, those who need the system, those who defend the system. If the system is crazy, you're only not evil if you don't know the system is crazy. If the system is corrupt, you're only not corrupt yourself if you can ignore that the system is corrupt. But as this deep state apparatus begins to emerge, as the corruptions and predations of the system begin to emerge, as the corruptions in the FBI and other organizations begin to really emerge, it's tough. It's tough. People are desperate to not know that the system is corrupt that pays them. You don't want to be Tony Soprano's wife, Edie Falco character. You don't want to be that person. You want to be blind. You don't want to, don't let me see, don't let me see. See no evil, spend all good. See evil, blood money. And this is the fundamental battle that's going on, I believe. This is why the next thing is we've got mental illness, craziness, sanity, and insanity. It's tough. It's tough. Because if the system is crazy and Donald Trump is a genius, two things I believe to be true with good empirical evidence. Then as Trump succeeds, the craziness of the system gets revealed more and more, both historically and in the present. And if you are suddenly aware, it pops up in your mind that you may have been profiting from a corrupt and evil system. Well, who's the crazy one now?
Stefan Molyneux on YouTube. Check him out. Subscribe. Now, I don't know if I agree that he's a genius, but I do believe that he is a, intelligent person. Doesn't mean I agree with him. Again, I think a lot of what the market's doing is speculation. The economy, even though it's getting better, it's not equal to what the market does. Not the free market, the stock market. The free market, it's coming, it's starting to build up where people are starting to, okay, I feel a little bit more secure than I did economically, or I'm getting back on my feet. I'm starting to feel a little bit better, but it's not, woohoo, let's go buy, a couple snowmobiles, and it's not there. Yeah, middle class still, they're holding on. What's left of the middle class? They're still, like, I don't trust it. I'm feeling better, but I still don't trust it. Again, back to why there's a bubble. What will Trump do, this, highly intelligent person? It's hard to really tell what he's going to do, because I think he's in over his head. He's not knowing exactly what he can do, what he can't do. He's trying to figure it out on the go. I think he has good intentions, but there's also a lot else that I think he won't respect. And that's when it comes to growing government. I think he's willing to grow government to get what he wants. Therefore, in the long run, it's going to backfire on us. That type of government growth always does. Um, Again, it's really hard to predict what Trump's going to do next. Tax breaks, that's good for people, but again, a lot of people are like, well, corporate ones, a locked in thing, and we get, 5 years. Yeah, I see your point, but I think it also becomes an opportunity. So we have to trust in ourselves more than we trust in Trump. I don't care what his IQ is. Because is he trying to dictate to me? That's where it comes down to. Now, I'm not a Trump, never Trumper or Trump basher, but I wasn't a Trump supporter either. Not the person I would have chosen for the job. But when he does good things, we should, point those out. And then when he does stupid things, we should point that out too. I really don't want to get into the whole thing that everybody's been getting into lately. I kind of want to steer clear of some of the BS and the fake news and all that. We have to look at actual policies. When it comes to immigration, I don't think we should only look at, third world countries. If we're going to be, equally open to immigrants, we should be equally open to immigrants, whether it be from, Great Britain or, an African nation or a South American nation or, Inuit, it does not matter. Every culture, country should be allowed in on merits of who they are. I believe that you can't go, well, we'll take everybody's criminals that they're basically banning from their country, or we can't take people that we don't know who they are from countries that we're at war with. Kind of seems legit, but our government can't also do what they did in World War II and in turn a race of people just because we're at war with the country that happens to be that race. The ethnic place that race was from. That's not right. So again, we have to really hold people's feet to the fire when it comes to this. Being intelligent doesn't mean that you are good or you're doing good. You can have high intelligence and evil intent. Not saying Trump has that. I'm just saying that. Level intelligence doesn't mean moral right. Now, if I can get this article up here, hopefully. Sorry, having a little issue. Oh, sorry, guys. guess let's see how quick we can crash the browser. Okay, we're getting back. Okay. Now, this out of the Blaze.com, left-winger Paul Krugman calls GOP know-nothings who are for bigotry and against education. Left-wing New York Times columnist Paul Krugman, who tweeted last January that President Donald Trump was obviously mentally ill the moment he took office, has added to his anti-conservative resume by writing that the Republican Party is full of know-nothings. In his Times op-ed published Monday, Krugman wrote that the GOP is trying hard to undermine the very foundations of American greatness, and that the range of issues on which conservatives insist that the facts have a well-known liberal bias just keeps widening. More from Krugman's piece. One result of this embrace of ignorance is a remarkable estrangement between modern conservatives and highly educated Americans. Especially, but not only college faculty, the right insists that the scarcity of self-identified conservatives in the academia is evidence of discrimination against their views of political correctness run wild. Yet conservative professors are rare even in hard science like physics and biology, and it's not difficult to see why when the more or less official position of your party is that climate change is a hoax and evolution never happened, you won't get much support from people who take evidence seriously. Krugman also seemed shocked that a clear majority of Republicans now say that colleges and universities have a negative effect on America. So the party that currently controls all three branches of the federal government is increasingly for bigotry and against education, he noted in his op-ed. That should disturb you for multiple reasons, one of which is that GOP has rejected the very values that made America great. Krugman added that he has no idea if our modern know-nothings will prevail, but if they do, they won't make America great again. They will kill the very things that made it great. What else has Krugman stated? White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders last month awarded the worst prediction for the year prize to Krugman for saying Trump's presidency would sink the American economy to such a low point that it would never recover. Krugman slammed Trump in September after it was reported that cholera emerged in Puerto Rico in the wake of Hurricane Maria. Krugman issued a correction after reports were found to be false, although his original tweet slamming Trump garnered 32,500 likes and over 14,600 retweets. He suggested on Twitter in December 2016 that Trump will intentionally allow terrorists to attack Americans during his presidency, arguing that he has incentives to do so. Krugman also argued before the 2016 election that sexual predation exists exclusively in the GOP, but cited only 3 examples. So, I think Krugman's been basically delegitimized for so long. How can you take someone like Paul Krugman serious? This guy is the ignorant, person. This guy is the one that he's ignorant and arrogant. And that's why stupid crap comes out of his mouth all the time. And I don't even like, I'm not a Trump supporter. I might like a few things he's done, but that's very little. I might be a little on the conservative side, but I'm more libertarian than anything. I like science. The simple fact that he makes arrogant and ignorant comments like that shows his bigotry and his lack of education or morals. I usually don't call out people like this, but Paul Krugman has dug his own grave. He sounds like a high school kid throwing a tantrum. You ever see the videos of the kid using big words, making himself feel big and just throwing a fit, and it gets posted on YouTube or Facebook or wherever? That's who he sounds like. I hate Trump. Trump's dumb. GOP's dumb. They're all idiots. They say colleges don't like them. Well, that's because they're not smart enough to be in colleges. Like, really? Are you serious? That's his problem. Okay, I do have one last clip I wanted to get to. Let me see what type of time we have here. Okay, we should have enough time for this one, as long as it loads quick enough. Top 3 Bitcoin updates this week. We are change.
You want to know the craziest fact for 2018? Craziest thing you've ever heard. If you had invested. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. And of course, this week we're going to do something different, like we always do pretty much every video. And if there's one thing that is true about 2017 is the impact that cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin not only had on the financial and central banking system, but also the community of freedom, libertarian, hippies, whatever. A lot of people made a lot of money off cryptocurrencies, and it is revolutionizing the way we live our life. So I thought, being a novice, being a newbie, there should be a show once a week describing everything important that happened in Bitcoin. I couldn't find it. Maybe I didn't even look. But I made a post on Facebook saying, is there a cryptocurrency expert that would love to do a show with me that could explain some of these things and go over the most important stories with me? The person who answered was of course, Josh of World Alternative Media. And he said, no. And then I said, okay, Josh, once a week. And he said, yeah. So here it is. We have Josh of World Alternative Media joining us here today. And Josh is going to start off today with describing the most important story that happened this week, of course, in the cryptocurrency world.
Glad to be joining you, Luke. One cannot have looked at the cryptocurrency market this week without noticing a major, I guess you could call it correction. It was a big dip. And the reason behind that was due to a Reuters report claiming that South Korea was going to attempt to ban cryptocurrencies, and they cracked down on a big exchange in South Korea, which led to a lot of panic selling. Now, basically, it was the justice minister of South Korea that made a small statement. Reuters took it, ran with it without actually looking into the story and doing their own due diligence and actually informing themselves. But the reality is it was just a justice minister saying something. It led to a bunch of panic or FUD. There's a lot of fear in the market, and there's a lot of misunderstanding and doubt and etc. So basically, it led to a big sell-off. But it wasn't a big deal because the people of South Korea spoke very strongly that they do not wish to see a ban. There was really no ban planned in the first place, but there was a lot of media, nonsense that was kind of, messing with the market. So right now, there is actually a petition. 100,000 signatures have filed to reject cryptocurrency trading ban proposals in South Korea, as well as 30,000 signatures were filed to remove two ministers, the justice minister and the finance minister in South Korea, due to this attempted move. But of course, it was all FUD. There was absolutely nothing to the story, and it was just another attempt by mainstream media, government, and banks to attempt to scare people away from Bitcoin because there's something very revolutionary happening to the monetary system and politics in the cryptocurrency space.
So wow, I mean that's fascinating. A mainstream media company got something wrong and had very negative effects on a lot of people. I just can't believe that something like this would happen. But obviously, it's been happening for a very long time, especially if you look into the kind of cryptocurrency world. You've seen the mainstream media downplay this and attack this entire kind of movement that has been coming out of the grassroots from its very existence, saying that the price of Bitcoin will completely, utterly collapse when it was $25, when it was $100, $200, $2,000. And of course, now they're saying it's a bubble, it's going to pop. And you see the kind of continual trend happening over and over again. And without a doubt, people should never trust, especially the mainstream media, with their interconnected power establishment tentacles, with important news, with what's happening as we've seen with this story.
Yeah, they're forced to report on it now. I think for a long time they just ignored it, and now it's gotten to the point where they can't ignore it anymore. So they are doing everything in their power to try and bash Bitcoin, bash other cryptocurrencies to scare people away from the market, and it's simply not working. If anything's a bubble, it's a fiat system. People are rushing out of the fiat system, the bonds markets in droves towards cryptocurrencies, gold, silver, etc. That which is decentralized, that which is not manipulated, and that which ensures wealth. And we have seen that quite prevalent in recent days. And moving on from that, there's another big story. And, again, it comes down to the media, the banking system, and the government. And the government in the United States on January 1st passed a new tax code amendment. And that is in order to allegedly try and stop trading by taxing the event of trading between Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, Monero, all of that. You have to file losses, you have to file gains, etc. And it's not really enforceable, but as it goes, it says the act in Section 13303 amends IRS Section 1031 to delete property and replace it with real property. So basically, it's an attempt to say, if you guys want to trade on an exchange, you are going to have to file taxes for it, which is absolutely absurd. It's not going to work. People aren't going to do it. They flooded out of the system in the first place, so why would they go and say, hey, government, here's every trade I've done for the last year. I've traded, the average of 15,000 times in the last year, so here's every single gain, every single loss, and here, come and take my money. It's absolutely absurd, and it's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only impossible to enforce, but it's also impossible to keep track of. And ultimately, what this law does is make anyone who trades cryptocurrencies into a criminal. And of course, they could also selectively use this law to go after key people that, of course, are enemies to the establishment and the state, only, of course, enforcing their power monopoly and making it harder and harder for decentralized kind of platforms to flourish with more government regulation, with more government control. We actually seen the same from Steve Mnuchin, just announced that he doesn't even want Bitcoin to become the next Swiss bank account for the average human being. It's what Barack Obama used to describe cryptocurrencies, a Swiss bank account in the hands and pockets of every single human being. This is an incredible power, and slowly and surely, we're not only seeing attacks by the mainstream media, we of course are seeing major attacks from the government trying to take this kind of apparatus down as fast as they can, which leads perfectly to the next story that you're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. There is an attempt by the Bank of England to beat Bitcoin with a rival cryptocurrency in 2018 that for now on I'm going to call Britcoin, coined it here. And it is very similar to Fedcoin, which was an idea proposed at the Federal Reserve in 2017. And it just shows a massive desperation by the central banking system to attempt to co-opt this movement. We've seen similar things with Ripple, a very centralized cryptocurrency. It's an attempt to take over the market. But the thing is, people are intrinsically free, and it's a desperation move because the Federal Reserve is attempting to raise interest rates as much as they can artificially in order to drop them out if the dollar, or when the dollar fundamentally comes crashing down. And with that said, they can't do it. It's going to go into negative interest rate territory. So they are trying to create a centrally planned cashless society. Now, a centrally planned cashless society is a vastly different situation than what we see with Bitcoin, with most cryptocurrencies that are decentralized. So people often say, well, the new world reserve currency is going to be Bitcoin or something like that. It's nonsense. The idea that they would release a decentralized cryptocurrency that other people can mimic with better cryptocurrencies is absurd. Basically, there's been this push in China and India with their Aadhaar system, which takes retina scans for payments. Sweden and Australia, Canada to a good degree as well, in order to create a cashless, centrally planned system. So let's look at fiat. Fiat is legal tender currency based in debt, quantitative easing, fractional reserve banking run amok. It's completely controlled by the central bankers. Now, if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's. And if your money's always going through the banks via digital transactions, it's never your money, it's always the bank's, and you are essentially enslaved to the government and banking system through legal tender laws. With cryptocurrency that's decentralized, it is based in scarcity, hopefully, demand, and application use. And that is what makes it so great. So when you see these cashless systems pushed forward by the central banking system in order to implement into the special drawing rights at the IMF to create a new world reserve currency, a global, centrally planned crypto or digital currency, I got to watch out with the words there, then that is what we should be watching out for. This attack on cryptocurrencies as if they are going to use this to enslave us is nonsense. They cannot. It's mathematically, fundamentally impossible, and it's a competing currency market where people can easily switch from one to another in opposition to said currency. That's the beauty of the free market.
And just like we're seeing the UK government make their move just now, we also have seen similar moves by Russia, by Facebook, by Goldman Sachs, trying to put their foot into the door of this whole kind of cryptocurrency revolution that's happening at the same time when the government is trying to crush down on the real kind of decentralized platforms that are out there so they could push these kind of new supposed cryptocurrencies that will cryptocurrencies that will ultimately revert back to the old kind of monetary system that we have now that is controlled by, of course, the very few. Now, it's very interesting that you brought up this kind of debate because I've been seeing this debate and this kind of chatter going on for a very long time whether Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies will bring in the cashless society where everything is tracked, which, you know, when you look at the blockchain, there's really nothing really autonomous. There's really nothing secretive about where your Bitcoin goes on the public ledger. So I've seen a lot of people talk about the NSA documents that came out in the 1990s talking about creating an own cryptocurrency. There's the fact that no one knows who created Bitcoin. So I understand where a lot of that fear and speculation of comes from. And the whole cryptocurrency world, to say the least, is filled with speculation. So I understand some people's kind of hesitations towards even accepting or going fully into this thing. I mean, I've been hesitant for a while. I don't know how you've been, because you do see a lot of pushback, but you also do see a lot of amazing opportunity in this entire world. And when I do see big banksters and when I do see government officials criticize cryptocurrencies, it gives me hope, and it shows that it possibly is going in the right direction. But I think ultimately, no one really knows.
Yeah, when you see people like Warren Buffett, who bails out bubbles, housing bubbles, etc., and loves banks like, Wells Fargo, which defrauded countless people and was caught in a court of law doing so, they're attacking gold and Bitcoin, which is a big red flag, because for people who, they hate gold, but they hoard gold, just like these big banks across the world, Deutsche Bank, they attack gold, but they hoard gold. And we see the same thing with Jamie Dimon attacking Bitcoin, but hoarding, cryptocurrencies and attempting to push his own idea of a cryptocurrency. Look, there is definitely an attack, and then there's also buy-up of cryptocurrencies by banks. There's no doubt that there is some sketchy relevance when you look at that NSA documentation, but it doesn't really apply. So when you look at that NSA documentation, it doesn't really quite go into decentralization. It goes into a digital currency on a blockchain kind of system, which would be pushed in order to kind of push people under that and spy on them, etc. But why would they put out a cryptocurrency that allows others to take the idea, run with it, and create their own and separate from that original cryptocurrency? If it was just going to pull away from the central banking system, it doesn't benefit them to do so. And while there's a lot of attacks, I have been hesitant for a long time. I was hesitant when I first learned about it in 2009, when it was at about 7 cents, and a friend of mine told me to put $2,000 into it, and I didn't. And today, that would be worth, well, you could do the math, 7 cents to around $14,000. I'd be very happy and not having to depend on YouTube monetization, which they don't do anyway, to live. So I think that it's really important that people understand the upside to this, the opportunity to this, the innovation that can be built on top of this to create our own free market system with competing currencies. And you cannot stop a good idea whose time has come, as so many people have said before. So as we build on this, we will see innovation. There's the attack by possible quantum computing, but the blockchain technology is growing at a faster rate than that is. So therefore, they're going to just keep having to catch up. And people have often said things like Bitcoin, they're a bubble and they're a trap, they're a bubble. Well, I think the real bubble is a fiat system, and people say that, there's going to be a time when people try to flood out of the cryptocurrency market and won't be able to because they won't be able to sell off, kind of like stock market crashes. Well, in my opinion, I think it's going to be different than that. I think it's going to be people trying to flood out of the fiat system and not being able to sell off what they have left. We've seen what's happened hundreds of times throughout history with fiat centrally planned systems. Going back to 1024 AD in China, hundreds of fiat currencies have failed, and the only one that hasn't failed is the US dollar, and it's on its way over to that pile of wreckage. We have seen that the fundamentals are no longer on the table due to the level of manipulation in the monetary system. So you can't put a date on the crash, but it's going to happen. That's why it's good that people diversify and prep in any way they can. Now, this is not meant as financial advice. For legal reasons, I have to say that this is my opinion. But this is so important. People have to do their own due diligence and start saving up for whatever's to come, because it's better to over-prepare than under-prepare.
Very well put, Josh. And of course, I think everyone has those kind of stories like, oh man, if I would have invested. I mean, I had people like Max Kaiser telling me about cryptocurrencies when they were just pennies on the dollar. And I was like, it sounds like a cashless New World Order government thing. I don't have time to figure out this nerd stuff. And now, of course, there's also a lot of greed. But I always say, be skeptical of everything. Be skeptical of cryptocurrencies. Only invest what you're willing to lose, and be smart about things. Diversify in all different kinds of assets, all different kinds of way. But one thing that is sure, that there's a lot of interesting, fascinating dynamics happening in this cryptocurrency world. And if you guys want to see this show flourish and continue every single Saturday, share it with your friends and family members. If this video does well, we will continue doing it every single Saturday. I want to thank Josh from World Alternative Media. His link will be in the description below for joining me on this broadcast. And, of course, I'm going to give you the last word and, of course, a chance to, of course, plug your Steam It, which has been huge for independent media like myself and you.
Yeah, first of all, you can find me on YouTube at World Alternative Media. For the time being, you kind of have to deal with YouTube until we find a true replacement. DTube, the Steam It plugin, is a great alternative. We just need to get people there first, because we can't just be talking in an echo chamber. We have to be educating. So you can find me at World Alternative Media on YouTube, World Alternative Media on Facebook, and on steamit.com at steamit.com/Josh Sigurdsson. And Steemit is huge. It's absolutely a revolution of social media. People left the telegraph machine for the phone. People left the mainstream televised corporate media to decentralize with something like Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, etc. Now people are moving to a truly decentralized blockchain-based alternative like Steemit.com and DTube, where basically you can do whatever you were doing on Facebook on Steemit and potentially make a decent amount of money off Steam, and you could trade it into whatever you want. Steam and its counterpart SBD, which is a risk mitigating token that you get one of per dollar on your post, or half of your post, is going up at rocket speed and making people a ton of money. The worst thing that can happen on Steemit.com is that you make a little bit of money. The best thing that can happen is you can make hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's life-saving for independent media, because YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all these guys are shadow banning, muzzling us, demonetizing this government-sanctioned entity that they claim is a private company, but it really isn't. It's a government-sanctioned company. But they're spying on us. They're stealing our information. They're muzzling us. They're deciding what we get to see. And Steemit.com is decentralized, based on individual demand of the person looking at the post. You can upvote it. You can downvote it if you want to be a hater. And it's all good. I mean, it's definitely the future. We got to get more people over there. And we will see independent media prevail on that platform.
And to be honest, it saved my butt. So a huge shout out to the Steemit and DTube community, because they've been huge when it comes to sustaining real independent media that's not brought to you by banksters, the corporatists, the horse stream media, and all these other finaglers out there who really have an ulterior motive because of the almighty dollar, which is ending and is somehow becoming diversified, decentralized cryptocurrency. I love you guys. Thank you again so much for watching. Stay tuned for more.
Whenever there are riots anywhere in the world, Luke is there on the ground.
Oh, shit. Oh, shit.
I'm a fucking journalist, you motherfucker!
Immediately disperse. You must leave the immediate vicinity.
When politicians need a reality check, he faces them and confronts them head on.
What happens when you worship Moloch at the Bohemian Grove?
When there's an injustice in the world, we expose it. They also talk about some hippy-dippy stuff like mushrooms, DMT, acid, quantum physics, consciousness, and seeking solutions to the problems that we face. We travel.
We are Change. We are change.org, and we are Change on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, when you look at cryptocurrency, I've said that there's going to be a correction, that there was a bubble. The manipulating, buying and talking crap about it and dumping it on the market, that's been going on. That's been going on for a while, and they've tried it multiple times, and it never seems to work. If anything, all it does is bring more attention to it, which has allowed it to continue to grow. So I don't think that they're going to be able to push that, let's crash Bitcoin and get our Fed coin going. Yeah, I just don't see it coming to light. Definitely after the blockchain technology has been used in other cryptocurrencies now, where, they've broken away from Bitcoin and created basically the exact same thing, that all these other, cryptocurrencies, what they're calling cryptocurrencies, that are centralized, are not really going to take off. They're not going to have the value that a decentralized cryptocurrency has. Now, can the market get flooded with cryptocurrencies? Yes. But then that only furthers Bitcoin. If you flood it with, more of, we already have, Litecoin, Ethereum. It can get flooded, but I think there's going to come out on top about 4 or 5, trusted cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin will probably be one of them. Could it get phased out? It might, but I doubt it. It's been established. It's the one that companies have gravitated to. Again, I think there's been a correction. I think that all of this, will straighten itself out unless all mainstream companies start dropping it, which I don't see that happening yet. But I warn that it always could happen. Okay, on to the last thing before the end of the broadcast. And there's an article about it at reason.com you can check out. And this has to do with Adam Kokesh. Well, Adam Kokesh officially went to file the proper paperwork to run for a candidate for the Libertarian ticket to seek nomination to run as a Libertarian for the presidential ticket in 2020. Right after doing so, and the announcement coming out, Adam Kokesh was pulled over. Well, it was about, suspicious plate, or, they weren't sure about something. Well, it comes out he's leasing to own the RV that he drives from the owner, and that was straightened out. No problem. Cool. Gets back on the road. Makes it a little ways down the road, gets pulled over again. This time, gets arrested. I have a real short clip from his girlfriend explaining what they know at this point. And actually, there is a new one out. I'll play that. It's real short.
Since Adam can't be here to make his own statement, he's provided me with the statement he would like for you all to have. He says, "What has occurred to me in the last 24 hours was a gross miscarriage of justice. I have not been presented with any paperwork regarding my arrest. In court, I was denied my request to receive it. The criminal officers who are guilty of an unlawful arrest will be held accountable. It is a sign of strength of the freedom movement that the government is resorting to such drastic tactics to keep libertarians out of the debate. Thank you, everyone who offered or pledged support. Thank you for all the calls and the prayers and the love that you send. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of you who fight the tyranny of government."
Now, I'm going to stop it there because we are at the end of the broadcast. But that's Adam Cook. Stay tuned here.